So, the recently released Jeffrey Epstein files, they're filled with countless disturbing threads. But today, we're going to pull on one of the most chilling and just bizarre ones. This strange, obsessive connection to the fairy tale character Snow White. We're going to follow this rabbit hole, looking only at the documents and analysis laid out in our source material. So, what even is the Snow White rabbit hole? Well, according to the source material, the whole thing seems to kick off with a single, deeply unsettling photograph that was found in the files. And this is that picture. This is the image that really started it all. It was released back in December, and it shows someone in a full Snow White costume. Now, according to the source, the background, the decor, the furniture, it all strongly suggests this photo was taken inside Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion. It's an eerie enough image on its own for sure, but as the files reveal, this is so much more than just a one-off thing. Yeah, that photograph is really just the tip of the iceberg, because once you start digging into the emails, as the source material shows, Snow White becomes this recurring and honestly deeply obsessive theme. How obsessive? Well, the phrase Snow White appears a staggering 60 times in the released files. 60. According to the source, that's no coincidence. That is a clear and really disturbing pattern. Just take a look at this email from 2010. It's heavily redacted, you can see that, but what isn't blacked out is pretty chilling. It explicitly links someone putting on the costume with some kind of immediate action, followed by 2 smiley faces. The implication there is just really direct and creepy. And in another email from that very same year, the source material shows Jeffrey Epstein himself writing this. He's actively trying to coax someone into wearing the costume specifically so he can take pictures. And it doesn't stop there. The emails are littered with these cryptic mentions over several years. I mean, there's one email where the only thing in it is the subject line, Snow White. Another one, sent to Epstein while he was in jail, just says, I watched Snow White. It all points to this persistent, coded language they were using. So who else is mixed up in this strange code? Well, the source material points to one name that keeps popping up right alongside these Snow White references, Jiz Staley. And this is where the story takes another really dark turn. So, who is Jiz Staley? According to the source, he's a very high-profile American banker, the former CEO of Barclays, in fact. The New York Times reportedly described him as Epstein's chief defender at J.P. Morgan, where he allegedly helped Epstein keep his accounts active even when there were internal concerns. And then the files reveal this email from Jiz Staley to Jeffrey Epstein. That was fun. Say hi to Snow White. In just a few words, it directly and chillingly connects Staley to that Snow White code we've been talking about. Epstein's reply is maybe even more telling. He writes back, what character would you like next? The source material really hones in on that one word, next, which just heavily implies this wasn't the first time. It suggests this was a recurring arrangement. This next exchange just further illustrates the weird, coded nature of their conversations. Staley suggests Beauty and the Beast, and Epstein replies, well, one side is available. It's this disturbing back and forth that seems to totally solidify their shared hidden language. But you know, the connections don't just stop with the emails. The source introduces another powerful and deeply personal piece of evidence that seems to corroborate all this. A painting from an Epstein survivor. The artist's name is Maria Farmer. Now, the source notes that she is a survivor who actually reported Epstein to the police for CSAM charges, that's child sexual abuse material, way back in the 1990s. She now uses her painting as a way to process her trauma. And one of her paintings depicts an absolutely chilling scene. A man, just in his underwear, holding a finger to his lips in that shushing gesture, and he's looming over a victim in a Snow White costume who is lying in a bed. And this is where the source analysis draws a direct comparison. It puts the painted figure right next to a photo of Jiz Staley. And the physical resemblance? It's pretty stark. Okay, so let's pause and connect these dots. The source material doesn't just present these as isolated facts. It really lays out a clear trail of evidence that connects all these disparate elements into one very disturbing story. So the trail begins with that one photograph of the victim in the costume. That leads us to dozens of obsessive emails. Those emails directly link the banker, Jiz Staley, to the Snow White code. And then finally, a survivor's painting seems to visually corroborate that entire link, depicting a man who looks like Staley in a scene with a victim dressed as Snow White. And here is the crucial, just unbelievable takeaway from the source material. Despite this trail of evidence laid out plain as day in the files and seemingly backed up by a survivor's art, Jess Staley is reportedly a free man. There are no pending investigations or charges against him. And that leads us to the central, deeply unsettling question, right? The files are public, the evidence trail as laid out in the source material seems pretty clear. So the question we're all left with isn't just what happened, but why, after all of this, there still appears to be no accountability.